Lucy, how are you?
Hi Nikki, I'm good actually, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, good to see you, and thanks for coming on to another bite size from the Sussex Collaborative.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Anything that we can do to try and disseminate some useful information, always happy to oblige.
Perfect. Well, I think today one of the things we were thinking about was, as people are starting to get back into the workplace, it's opening up quite a few questions around kind of what businesses have to do from an employment law perspective. So, you've got lots of knowledge, so hopefully you can answer some of the questions that I know Joe, myself and some of the other guys have had. And yeah, so I guess one of the things that we've all been doing is working flexibly from home. And that's sort of become a norm for us over the last 14 months. And quite a few employees are now kind of faced with going back into the workplace. But from a contractual perspective, would you say that home working's now falling into kind of like custom and practice, where legally people don't have to actually go back to the office?
No, I think not. Because their jobs have always been office based, if they are now able to go back into the office, then they have to do so. It was the government who advised that working from home should become the temporary new normal. But if your employment contract says that you are contracted to work in the office, then unfortunately the last 14 months doesn't change that.
Right, and what happens if on the flip side of that, a lot of employers have found that they've had to close down office space because they've not been able to afford it over the last while. So if an employer is asking an employee to work from home on a permanent basis, how does that stand contractually?
Well, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if the office is no longer there, it's not possible to work in the office. And if that employee has been able to work from home, theoretically that can continue. That said, contractual changes to employment contracts can't be made unilaterally by the employer. They have to be done by agreement. So that one will cause a few issues. But as I said, if there's no longer an office in which to work, and the role has changed in as much as it can be done at home, the employee might, if they refuse to work from home, find themselves in a really difficult situation whereby there isn't actually a role for them.
Right, and I suppose then in which case they might have to go through a consultation process?
That would very much depend on how long they've been employed there and what their own personal situation is. But that could, yes, end up in a redundancy situation.
Right, okay, so yeah, it's definitely something I suppose people have to think about, on both sides, both from an employer and an employee.
Absolutely. And we always say it's all down to communication, really. Employers can dictate what their employees do and don't do, but it's not the best way to go about keeping your workforce happy.
Yeah. The other thing that seems to be cropping up at the moment and coming up to half term, I think it's quite a hot topic, is traveling overseas on holidays. So, lots of people are taking the trips away, and potentially, there's this confusion about what an amber destination is and what you've got to do. But if somebody's gone away on holiday and finds that as they're about to come home, they get a positive test and have to stay overseas to quarantine, where do they stand from a work perspective?
Well, that unfortunately for them is annual leave or unpaid leave. As an employer, you're contractually obliged to give your employee annual leave, which they will have taken for their holiday. But it's not the employer's responsibility if they wind up either in quarantine or ill. That needs to be dealt with in their own time, unfortunately.
Okay. And if they're coming home and have to self-isolate, I guess, because of going to a certain destination that requires that. So I suppose they could work from home whilst they're self-isolating.
Absolutely, absolutely. If they're not poorly and they can work from home, and the employer is quite happy with that, then yes, absolutely they can. Otherwise, they would have to take extended annual leave or unpaid leave. It's a difficult time. It's risky to know when and where to go on holiday. Employers, however, all they need to do is offer the annual leave entitlement, and anything outside of that is not their responsibility, I'm afraid.
Yeah, fair enough, isn't it? Are there any other things that are coming up that you've heard of that are sort of challenging with the easing of lockdown?
Oh, I think there's an awful lot of nervousness going back to work, not just the employers wanting to get employees back to work and employees not necessarily wanting to go back to work. There's a nervousness as to safety. So for those who are travelling on public transport to go to work, and then once they get into the office, and again, it always comes back to communication, having a conversation with the workforce as to why they might be feeling unsure. Can they stagger their hours so that they don't have to take public transport in peak times, if that would make them feel more comfortable? Making sure that everyone is having a full and frank conversation to make going back to work easier.
Yeah, because I suppose if allowances like that are not being made, and then suddenly employees are getting stressed and mental health issues start kicking in because of it, then there could be a cause for claims or employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody's mental health is feeling a wee bit fragile at the moment. And just as we don't want to jeopardise anyone's mental health, we don't want to jeopardise their physical health. So if they're travelling to or from an area that may have a higher rate and their public transport is particularly busy, I think it's incumbent on employers to have a look at how to make that easier for employees, try and reduce every stress, physical and mental, that's possible.
Yeah, so that's really useful advice, Lucy, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of different things popping up over the next few months as we all kind of like get used to this change and things kind of evolve. But how can people get in touch with you if they've got further questions?
They must absolutely feel free to call us on the office number, which is 0333 400 44 99. We can find us online at cognitivelaw.co.uk. All the contact details are on there, and we'd be delighted to talk to anybody.
That's really great. Thanks, Lucy, and thanks for your time.
My pleasure, Nikki. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.